right, it's Monday. I hope everybody's had a good week. And all right, here's today's page. It's the funeral, a drive-through funeral service. It was suggested by Marshall Lee, and thank you, Marsh, for that suggestion. So there we go. So yeah, this page is finished off. I've got these other pages finished off. It's been a bit of a busy time right now for me, so I've been doing an awful lot of other things, and so because of that, I haven't been 5 days a week, but we'll get back to what we can. I'm going to be away tomorrow. I'm going to be away tomorrow as well, but in the meantime, I got some stuff to show you today, and a fun idea for people to try today. So, just there's our page for today, and here comes our overhead. Woo woo! Hi. Corbin's having a sleep in his chair, which is always a great thing for Corbin to be doing. You know, not all up in my grill, yo. So, okay, here is something that I've been doing. I do a fair amount now, and I have fun doing these things. This is scrap paper, old prints, you know, and so I take this paper and I doodle out pages on them. And like I break it down into page layout, and so what that gives me is a chance to explore a bit of story, to do it in a somewhat similar height to, or somewhat similar scale to the way I'm working. I don't, you know, so I just grab some paper and start going. So you can see how I did an orange outline box on this page, and then, you know, I've cut it, like, I've gone over with the red to show where the actual frame shapes are going to be. And then here's the composition that's drawn inside. So this doesn't actually have an exterior frame to it. You know, now I could have gone in with a white and tried to make that disappear, but come on. We got stuff to do, folks. You know, no more border. No more border. No more border. There you go. That's for the kids back home. And so the big challenges with stuff like this is that oftentimes when we're working out pages, we tend to be a little bit precious with those. And the preciousness of it can keep you away from some kind of energy or some kind of the possibility of, you know, being able to sit down and find new directions that you might not normally, because you're so caught up, you're so, you know, worked up in, you know, I want to have a certain stylistic approach and quality and things like that, where you might be missing out on opportunities because of it. Other people will approach these things with the idea of, I want a style similar to X, or I want to, you know, have my work on a caliber like Y. You know, those things come over time. So, you know, don't worry about taking stock of all that all the time. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're trying and you're having fun and you're playing and exploring ideas that honestly you might not have, where you know, trying to flesh this out in a very different way. The way that I put the story bits on with the blue pen over top is just to explore a story idea, a possible direction for this tale to take. 6 people, prepare yourselves. We're here. Have we really found one? It's more than a myth, says one of them. It's getting bright. And let's let our eyes adjust to the light. And then one says, it's unbelievable. I find it terrifying, says another. And a third one yet says, how is that orb floating there? And so what these 6 people have discovered is a big sleepy giant. Maybe no longer with this giant. Susanna says, "Hi, Chris. I thought you could make the live. I thought you could make the live tomorrow, but here you are." Hi there. Have a nice Monday, says Chris. Hey, hi everybody. yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it live tomorrow because it's Pancake Day, um, and I've got an event that I'm doing where I'm going to be doing a coloring class with a bunch of kids. So yeah, woohoo! So we'll see. So this is just a random scrap of paper, and it's flushing out a little story moment, just scratching an itch, right? And so I want to do a story where some people go through a door into a cavern and where there's a big giant sleeping and a glowing ball above it. And so what the fun part of the glowing ball is that where I continue this further and ink it, I have to figure out the light source as projected by that ball in the center. And that's fun. Unfortunately, I can't stay long. I need to solve a possible plagiarized exam case at school today. Oh no! Uh-oh. We have entered the days of ChatGPT and all that business. I hope that works out, Chris. So, a couple of other ways to go about this. Here's another project. Okay? Here's another little quick scribbly dibble bit of business. And this is what I'm talking about, where I'm constantly doing pages. I just don't post them all. I just don't take them all to completion. Sometimes it's just about exploring a story idea and playing with it for a few minutes and then letting it go. So here's some soldier types, government types, and here's these two people being brought forward, and they who comes forth to request to bear the mantle. I don't get specific in explorations like this. I'm trying some language that might, be how these people speak in this sci-fi world. Present the supplicants who comes forth the request to bear the mantle. And here these two say, I do. And who would argue against this? Can't read my own writing. Who would argue against this? And somebody says, this one would. That's this character. And these beings are two of no particular value. It is a case of whether or not they are worthy. These beings are two of no particular value. They have ability and skill, but what then? Will they stand tall before the onslaught? And so here's the two of them, and this assembly of people that you saw is all presented here. And the whole idea is that these are floating platforms. So I play with it some more. Chris has good news. I might have a new schedule after March 15th, and I might not work on Mondays. Woo! Oh, excellent. There you go. That'll be nice. Well, I have to set up a hangout session here. So the arbiter says, will they stand tall before the onslaught? Will they indeed? Should we ask of them if they think this true? And then the audience that's in this assembly starts going, ask a no, ask a no. So they're rough notes. Like this here, these people are there. This is that. And the idea is that it's all moving around, right? I get the idea of it when I'm just scrabbling this together. I don't feel it necessary to define it more clearly because I'm not in this situation doing it as a finished page. Were I doing it as a more finished image, I would draw it as such. But this is one of these little quick scribble exercises to pull out an idea, pull at a string, which is something I do a lot with the one-page stories. So the exercise here is ask and no. And so these two start recounting their tale. And so, their spaceship is the first to get off the planet. I'm going to just paraphrase because I can't read my own writing half the time. Anyways, their little ship is the first to get off the planet. That's it. It's the first to get off the planet. It might be the only one, depending. So here's this alien fleet that's arrived at their home planet. Let's call it Earth. And these two kookaburras get in their ship and go off to meet it. So the two are in their cockpit, and the ones, he says, looking for any incoming communication channels. So let's go and say hello. So there they are pulling up against the fleet. So we see the alternate view from here, where we see the back of their ships and their engines, and then we don't. So here they do, and they pull up, and then we switch over to the interior of the main ship, I guess, maybe, or one of the ships. And And this has a little asterisk in a narrative box at the top that says translated from the original language. I don't have to be specific about that when I'm just playing at ideas. And then, so there's a glorb sound that says, come into our orb, our pardon majestic. And so this silhouetted character is some kind of ruler of these people. And a vessel from the harvest globe approaches. Shall we contain and harvest it? And then she starts in flowery language going on about, isn't that what we do? But why has only one ship come to greet us? Is it singular? Is it with purpose? Acquire it. And so there's our little breakaway from, so now we've had two transitional ships. Contemporary times, and what I really should do is put a little dialogue box here that says earlier. Well, actually that should go right there, okay? Because this is them talking in this assembly, and then now, so I thought I'd do that with a color shift so people got it in the first place. But anyhow, so there's them talking about going to meet up the ship, and then we go inside the enemy ship to see her say, this is what we do. We go to planets and steal all the resources and all the things that we can from them. But why is this? It might be the first time that someone's just flown in a single ship to go up against them. So she wants it to study. And so a bunch of little ships are shot out of the bottom of the big spaceships. And here's our two guys. They've launched a number of smaller craft. Are they lined up to attack? There's energy signatures coming off. She says, I'll try to evade. And then they circle around it and hold it in a force field, I guess. And it says, well, no such luck. What should we do? We didn't expect to be prisoners. He goes, no, this might be good. If they're busy with us, our planet might have a chance to raise a response. And it's time we go meet these visitors. So here's the ship being taken back to the main spaceship. That's it. That's all they did. No time limit involved and no specific, direction here, and no, just exploring page by page, like where can we go with this? And all in all, this is probably an hour of just playing with ideas, trying to shake up the presentation of things. And after I did this kind of rudimentary thing for an hour is where I took these 4 pages and I put them aside, and I had this next random page beside me, and so I picked this up and I did something completely different. But the difference is that sort of warm-up of really loosely scribbling together some kind of composition and some kind of characterization and some sort of fancy ideas and playing around with those. So then when I grab another piece of paper and I sit down, and for whatever reason, these 6 people going to sleep, sleepy giant, there's more finish to it. There's more structure and polish. We got better panel shapes here. It's more presentable. It's something that, this is an idea where the way it's framed and laid out and stuff like that could be something that we go and explore further, whether taking another sheet, putting it over top, and picking and choosing out the lines and images if we want, or we scan it and throw it in the computer and do it all digitally. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Point is that the first 4 pages of scribbling opened up our headspace so that we can now sit down with whatever other random ideas come to mind and chase that down with a little bit more structure. And I think that if I hadn't done the previous 4 pages, I probably wouldn't have thought about the adjustment of scale. Here's our people as a group in the opening. Here's them walking one behind the next in the hallway. Here's they get to the end of the hallway and it's too bright. And then as we open up into the big view, it's the view of our characters again, but from behind or the side. And big sleepy giant. So I probably wouldn't have thought of some of these ideas of approaching our story in this sort of a way if I hadn't done that sort of loosening up and work up. So, it's again, and I talked about this, especially with the page that I posted today about the robots, where I was using one, water based chisel tip marker, and that's not the right color, I realize, I don't care, and one ballpoint pen to pick out the details. That's how we did that page that I've posted today on social media of the funeral. I showed it at the start. It's the funeral drive-through service, and it's a very different approach, and there's a little bit more formalism. But one of the things that I talked about with that is that you can either try to draw this somewhat realistic-looking setting that's got dimension to it, or you can break it down to be a little more simplified. And I had that simplified image someplace here, and I don't know where I put it. So both of those things count just as much. You don't have to have whatever measure of drawing skill to explore the idea of story. Stick people, shape language, these things still do the same job, and oftentimes, if you can figure out this stuff before you figure out the finished images, it will service you much better in the process of storytelling than the finished, lovely da-da-da-da-da image. So, yeah, it's a different attempt to approach. So anybody that might be watching now, if anybody wants to say a random idea, whatever it is, and we'll explore it this way now and see what we come up with. Now, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do with this. There's a bunch of different methods that we can take to approach the same thing. So one of the things I thought I might do is I would take this big piece of paper, and I thought that I would break it down. Use a ruler, Chris. You use a ruler. And we can try 4 different rough attempts at it and see what that gives us for what is the most advantageous way of telling a story. And the reason that I talk about this, putting 4 panels together like so, and saying, let's take 4 cracks at the, what is it, 4 swings at the ball, or some sort of analogy. Okay, Chris says, crazy ideas are cool, right? Of course crazy ideas are cool. Crazy ideas are the best. Yeah, crazy ideas are always cool. It's the denial of ideas that, that holds us back. Like there's, and I'm not, okay, so here's a crazy idea, all right? Some people did a book called Skin, and I can't specifically remember the name of the writer and artist. I'm not sure who it was. But anyways, this book is about, I don't know if you know about this, but there was a drug called thalidomide. And thalidomide is a medication that was given to pregnant ladies to help with, I can't remember what the specific symptom that they were trying to address was, but one of the potential outcomes were defects in the children being born, and to the point that diminished development of the limbs. So they would have very short arms, maybe not all of their fingers, or very short legs, all kinds of challenges that were presented to these kids. And so this post-war 1950s medication that was given to people really kind of made a generation of young people that were affected by this. And so this book, Skin, is about this terrible character, this angry skinhead youth. But he's a thalidomide, what's called a thalidomide baby. And so he has diminutive arms. And he's so mad at the world. And he's very, very, very small, very petite. But he's got this massive chip on his shoulder. And it's just really interesting to me. And this is where it comes back to crazy idea. It's just really interesting to me that they chose that character to explore this idea of an angry youth with a chip on their shoulder. And they utilized the thalidomide background in that. I thought that was interesting. Chris says, what about politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war? There we go. Yeah, we'll do that. Too crazy maybe? It's Monday after evaluation of final writing test. Nope. So here we go. We'll write it down. It's politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. I like that. Okay, so there is Chris's idea. Okay, so now there's politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. That's our idea for today. So thank you for that, Chris. So that gives us all kinds of things to think about. We can either, there's a couple of different ways, and let's start just hacking at these and to start with. And I'll use, the yellow shows up okay. Yeah, I think the yellow shows up okay. So we'll try the yellow first. If that doesn't work, I'll switch to an orange. Is this person Nick Vujicic? He doesn't have limbs, but he's a motivational speaker. No. It's 1970s, a skinhead. He's an angry skinhead, and who has he has diminutive arms. And the whole book is about exploring the chip on the shoulder of this really angry, aggressive, racist youth. But they just happen to use they decided to make the character a young man who was affected by thalidomide as a baby. So, but there's a lot of interesting and crazy elements to that, to incorporating that aspect of the character. So it's really interesting. Okay, yellow's okay, Chris says. All right, here we go. So we've got politicians fighting on mud and instead of sending people to war. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. Off the top of my head, one of the things that's an immediate approach can be a fight poster. Politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. So let's start with our first panel here. And we'll just mark a 1, 2, and 3, 4. There we go. That's almost inch buddies. So with this in mind, okay, and I'm just all over the ding dong place today. There you go. Now, first thing that we can do is like a fight poster. So if we were to have, we look at 2 large panels, and then we can exemplify, 2 politicians, so one of them has got, his hands up. He talks. He's very one of these orators that talks with his hands, and there's a number of them in politics right now. So here's your first one with his hands up, and he's talking. And okay, so listen, this number, And then the second politician represents that other lofty ideal, largely European, of the great, determined leader, hands on his hips. They're the person who knows. So here's your 2 roughed-in politicians, and then you can do some fun where you have tonight, this country versus this country. So I might jump to the orange. See, this is why it helps to have a couple colors at once. So tonight, and then there's their first person versus our second person. And so we've identifiably established these 2 in space with one another, and we've made it kind of like a fight card or a fight poster for boxing events and things like that. So that can be one approach to it. And then you start getting into the, oh, Chris has got to go. Oh, fantastic. Thanks for coming by, Chris. Thanks for your suggestion. So here's our first idea, right? We'll start our page with this fight poster motif and our two characters on it. And then, you can have, here's the one character. So, okay, so let's do this. Let's step over to this now. So we'll have our announcer, okay, with the microphone. And he's got the handout. And so it's just a nice floating panel shape, okay? And it can even cross over this one. So then we come to another panel shape here. And here is our first leader sitting on a chair, and they've got their hands and gloves, and they're sitting there getting ready. And we can have one person massaging the shoulders. We can have another person with a bucket. And we're really playing on that boxing motif, okay? So there's our first fighter. And then our second fighter we'll put directly underneath again. And so this is where we allow ourselves more text, right? So we can describe the elements in the story a little bit more. And then so we'll put this person in the opposite corner, and he's just got his hands resting on his knees. Very relaxed position. Nobody around them. And one of the things that we can do with this background is that we can really play up, like here's the, I'm just going to use the stripes of the American flag for an example, but we can play up the big flag flying in the background like a photo montage behind our character. And in this character, it's the same thing. So where he has his core team around them, this one has a person running around with said flag that's now billowing in the wind, right? So just silly fun, but we'll go back here and we'll outline some of these elements just to give them some shape, okay? And then as we're looking at the shape of the page, there we go. So now we've got this character. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that brings us down to the two of them fighting in mud. And so then, because the whole suggestion is politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war, so the last one can be just a charnel house of splashes and nonsense as these two are fighting in a big mud pit. And it's just disgusting. So there's our last piece of fun. And we can do that open-ended, so that we know we can just be as gross and disgusting as we want. Nothing really matters, setting or anything like that. It's just all about these two guys fighting with one another. So there's the one, and then there's the other. So there's one. So there's one notion. And then, so our first idea from our suggestion of politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war, we've done in this way. So I'll just draw a guy here. And then I want a little character in the back. We'll just darken this up. Oh, this country, oh, this country, oh, this country, oh, this country. And then here's our other person who's standing here with his retinue. And then the massagist, whatever you call that. And the person holding the bucket. Better get a bucket. So there's the breakdown of our page, of our first page idea for the same idea. And then we'll put him with his hands at his sides. Look at me, I'm macho. And then the other one is our person who talks with his hands. Yeah, so there's the Fight Club version, right? So here's one idea. So another idea, same thing. We'll do another idea, the same thing. Politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. You can have a different approach to this. So let's start with, we want to introduce the different elements. We want to introduce politicians. We want to introduce the fact there's going to be mud in there. We want to introduce the war. And instead of sending people to war, is the important part. So how do we get another way for these two guys to scrap it out? We can have just jump right into it. We'll have the one person who's got their arm around the other person's head. And this one's got their arm going over their shoulder. And then we'll draw, they're like kicking out from underneath. And then we'll have this one trying to pivot their position as they keep this one in a headlock. And so this one will have their other arm up above. So here's our two politicians right out the gate. And they're fighting in the mud, just to start off with. Hi, Maritza, welcome back. So we're doing 4 different, anybody that's joining in with us, we're doing 4 different versions of the same suggestion that Chris just gave us. Politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. Our first one is like a boxing match, is how we've started with a boxing poster and introducing the two, and it ends with them in the mud. Our second one, we've just got them mud wrestling right off the hop. And, so we can have, here they are, and what we'll do is we'll put a bunch of characters that are in the background watching, okay? And we'll define them a little more clearly in future panels. So I'm going to jump back in, and I'll more clearly define these two guys. So here's our two dudes wrestling. All right, and then so here's their little audience in the background. And this audience will be all, I think it would be, suits and ties and generals. So we've introduced them here in our first panel, okay? And by doing so, and this will be all mud. And of course, they're all coated in mud and sloppy and slip-slidey. So by introducing these two characters in this central battle, but having these other characters on either side of them introduced in the same panel, now lets us take a leap from the fighting itself, and we can do it like this. I'm going to play with this idea of vertical panels instead of horizontal. So we can have suit and tie guy. Actually, let's have Army General with his arms behind his back. So we can have suit and tie guy and Army General for our first combatant talking here. You sure you trained him to do his best? And he's like, he won't fail our nation, And then the next image will be, and we'll do this Army General on the opposite side, and then beside him will be, another Army General / politician from, the bad guy side. So here they are saying similar sentiments to one another. Is that in frame? Yeah. So I'll pull it down here. Let's make it a little bit easier. All right. So, and then we can have, I think it'd be fun to have a shot where, we can either have a couple things. Let's do a big splash, and a nice little sound effect. So, splork. So we'll draw in our loose panel shapes. Here's the Army General guy. Here's politician guy beside him. Here's bad guy, Army General. Got him standing in a similar position. And then politician, former military guy over that. There's the splork. We'll put the dialogue in a second. We'll do some dialogue ideas. But, so we can do a shot here for the end where we've got, the two of them are just having a go. So we'll have a foot sticking up here and a foot sticking up there. And then this one's got a hip coming out and their foot sticking up like so. As though the two of them are completely submerged in the mud now. And then in the background, what's more important than our focus on the foreground, where these guys are, wrestling it all out for their nations. So we'll just get, some light representation of the foreground here. But what's more important than that is these four in the background that decide this isn't going anywhere. Peace treaty? Yeah, let's go sit down and write a peace treaty. So here's our second set of characters that we've been following through. And so where we can have the dialogue that we've started through the earlier panels, we're now taking to its conclusion point here. So what I'll do is I'll use this red to show the textual part of things. And so president versus prime minister, that could represent a lot of countries. AIDS, advisors, and we have the aides, the political aides here, and then the political advisors there. And they say, do you think he'll do well enough? He must for his country, for our country. And then, he will not embarrass us. Just to show a mentality shift, right? He is a great representative. He is great representative. There you go. And then when suddenly, so we'll just continue this little narrative box thing at the top of the panels. Splork, and mud splashing all around. And this could go on forever. This could go on for hours. And then says this one, and this one says peace treaty. And this, so this guy will say, yeah. Okay. And then our last one will say, I must get to my daughter's grandchild's hockey practice. There you are. So there's our second approach to the same idea of politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. Susanna says, I'm making some tea. Do you want a cup? Yes, please. Let's have a drink break. Yes, I would. Licorice chai. Licorice or chai or something. There we go. So there's our first approach. There's our second approach. Same suggestion. And we can draw. Let's come at it from a different angle for our third time. All right, I'm just trying to get it in frame. Is this better or worse? Have I made it worse? I've made it worse. I'm going to get my big head out of the way. And, okay, so here we go for our third one. So politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war is our suggestion. Thank you, Chris, for that. She just gave it to us to start off the stream. So our third idea, why don't we have our first politician, let's do action pose, so that our first politician is charging, and he's got his arms out in front of him. Rawr. Okay, and then the other politician from the other country he's got his charging motion here as well. And we'll have him with a more close, boxy kind of a style, right? So there's our first image. And what we can do is that we can play with another motif here. And so let's put our announcer holding his microphone here in the center. Okay? I'm so-and-so, and this is such and such, and what, right? And then we'll draw all the mud around them on the ground. Okay? But what we'll do in the background is that we'll have a panel framed here and a panel framed there that they're jumping out of, and they will show the land masses of their countries. Okay? And this way, now we've got such and such doing his best imitation of the guy from, I don't know, Survivor or whatever that stupid show is. And here's such and such for this country, there's such and such for that country, and we're in for a real treat tonight, folks. And then we can just spend the rest of the page having fun with, one guy getting knocked back by the first guy giving him a sacco in the jaw. So we'll have him flying back, and then we'll have another panel of this guy doing some kind of crazy jumping motion as he's flying through the air and come down on the first guy. And we'll have the first guy in a kind of dramatic, oh yeah, kind of a move. And just two more. We'll do two more panels. Ideally, they're all equal size. And then, so what do we got? We got punch, jump. Let's have the kick, big kicking motion by this guy. And we'll have this guy flying, oops, oof, as he gets kicked in the midsection. Real superhero type nonsense. And then the last one will be, or maybe we'll just have this one be as one that they're constantly encountering each other, or they're both, yeah, let's just do the whole wrestling linked and link thing. I like that better. And then we'll go back to our announcer, and just for fun's sake, we'll have him being splattered with mud. So if we're going to make a little more sense of this for ourselves, we'll come back in with our little outline here. There's guy A. There's the mud around his feet. And here's our announcer. And then here's guy B. charging across the middle. Out of the mud at the first guy. And then we'll put the mud at his feet as well. So there's our first shape, or first panel shape. And then we'll put these panels in behind that have the country images on them. So there's our guys with their 2 countries. And then we'll do our 4 panels underneath and the 4 different fight moves. And the big ending of the announcer getting sprayed by mud. Mud. So this is the wrestling one like we had in that earlier page where the 2 are facing off against each other. And then here's the whole, he's going to stomp on the other guy. And here's the other guy all prepared. And this one, guy number 2, is going to get stomped on in panel number 2. Gives panel number 1 guy a pap at his yapper. So there's our next breakdown of it. So this is more of a, it's similar to our first one with the big whole boxing match thing, but less so. It's less of like the title card and the old-fashioned kind of a boxing aesthetic, and more of a, the television event. And here we are, folks. And then, on the side of this thing is these 2 are about to square off. This one has the whole presentation of the 2 different boxers in the rings and in the corners, and before they start fighting in the mud. Our second one is literally like they've all pulled over at the side of a field somewhere after peace negotiations were stalled, and they decided to wrestle it out in the mud, and all their aides get bored and tired of this and like, do you want to go and do the peace treaty? Yeah, let's just go do it ourselves. I got to get to my grandchild's hockey practice, So our number 3 one is similar. It's more reminiscent of that first one, but it's far more like a television episode, a television program where they're fighting it out on screen. So politicians fighting on mud has been the challenge of this. Politicians fighting in mud would allow, or with mud, I'm sorry, politicians fighting in and on is very similar. But politicians fighting with mud allows us to have a big mud fight. And of them throwing mud at one another, which is another possibility that we can try. But let's do it in kind of a... So here's our first so what I'm going to think about here is that here's politician number 1, okay? And here's politician number 2. And he's got his hands at his side. Now, we can have some of this guy's aides standing over here at the side. And we can have some aides for this person over at the side for him, okay? And have them all under the porch of some kind of building where they're meeting. Let's say they're meeting here to talk about peace talks or something, scheme that we had from the previous one. And so there's the rooftop. And so what we can play with here is the idea that it's raining. Okay? So if we go back in and pick out the things that we want to stay here, we've got him over here. So here's our 2 guys, and then there's the aides over here on the porches, and then there's the porch, there's the front steps of the building. and then some of the posts. Okay, so this is where they went to have their summit meeting, and these two guys are sick of each other's nonsense, and they're going to fight it out. So it's a very different aesthetic, but this sort of plays on the whole idea of the cowboy trope of the meet one another outside at high noon. And so we can introduce our two fighters personally by having a shot of this guy and then having a shot of the opposite guy. Now, a way to show, for us to connect the viewer to which one is which, we've already seen his face, and so we've got him in the panel and he's facing in the same direction, right? And we've moved him over a little bit to this side of the panel to give you a sense that he's on this side of the conflict, right? And our second guy, we've pushed over to this side of the panel to give you a sense that he's the guy on the opposite side of that conflict. But now we get to see his face for the first time. And if the rain is going this way, in this panel, okay, the rain is going the opposite way for the other guy. But we get to draw the two of them standing here, ready to fight in the mud. And, you know, so when you would draw the finished image of this, these two guys, you know, they'd have rain running down off their noses. They'd have you know, they'd have their hairs all mussed. They've got rain coming down, dripping off of their nose. They've got their eyes squinting. I don't think I'm afraid of you, you know, type thing. And so here's the big face-off. And then the last panel, we can just get, you know, we can do one of two things. We can use a visual, a textual element as a visual one. So in this case, let's just have and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this red this time as it goes right over top of the middle panel, right? And the bottom of these two side panels. So there's let's wrestle. And then the bottom panel would just be the two of them just be going full bear. You know, scrapping it out in the mud. One guy's got his foot up in the air. And then the other guy, of course, has got his foot. His whole body's in it as well. We'll have his foot sticking out, and here they are. But what we can do is different approaches story-wise now. Hi, Liz. Welcome aboard. So because we've tried 4 different aesthetics, and I'll just finish putting in this last piece of information for everybody. You know, so here's these two wrestling in the mud. I was going to say a la carte. I don't know why that came to mind. So we can do 4 different narratives. So here's your boxing announcer, right? So this is, we'll put a note here that this page, number 1, what did I just write? Bouncing. Boxing. So this is boxing commentary. So that's our narrative approach to this, okay? And then our second one, okay, is a secondary character narrative. I guess this would be, we'll call this commentary as well, okay? And then this one is, so this will be television program, and I'm going to call this a narrative, all right, and a commentary, because we've got our host in the one panel, and then he gets splashed at the end. But then we can put some little bits of text over top of these panels that says stuff like, what kind of tea, Susanna? Liz wants to know. But our last one is, this is a straight up narrative, well, type of story for this one. So this one, you've got the two leaders of these nations meet, across from each other out there in the, the rainy desert or whatever. The whole point is that the four different interpretations of the same idea, politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war, on mud instead of sending people to war. And that's from Chris K. And there's today's suggestion on the page too. So the whole idea of having these four separate interpretations of how we can tell the same story, and to play with this idea is, Susanna's drinking green tea. The whole reason that we're doing this is so that we can explore this a little bit, the idea that's presented, and look at different possibilities for how we could tell that story. Oftentimes when creators will get a script, they'll have the text, the notes of the script going down on a page, and they'll do little thumbnails. They'll do little, scribble illustrations of page layouts or specific panel notes. I've seen where other illustrators, they'll get a script and they'll go through and they'll underline underneath certain actions within the dialogue and the narrative, like if there's caption boxes, which a lot of comics don't do nowadays because reasons. I don't understand why. It's a great thing to use in your storytelling. Maybe it's been used a little bit much, but having it fused into a story is advantageous. So why drop something that could work? There's just so many different ways that we can approach this. There's so many different methods that we can put into play in order to tell the story. There's different ways that we can stage it. There's different ways that we can, get those key pieces of information across. And it has an awful lot to do with generally the personal, stylistic choices that a creator might make. Let's say the first person draws this, okay? And their sensibilities lead towards, they want to do some a neat boxing poster. They want to have some wonderful symbolic imagery in the background of this, of the two panels as, to represent these two characters and their two nations. So this is very much a symbological one, whereas this one is a kind of, it's two guys just scrapping it out, and it's the side characters that are actually the key characters in the story. I write down the secondary character commentary because the two politicians are the ones fighting. Those are supposed to be our primary characters, but in truth, it's the people in the background that are arguing about, whether or not this person's going to win or that person's going to win. And then let's just go come up with a peace agreement. Okay, let's go. Because these politicians are nonsense, right? So the third one, by doing it like an audacious, flashy television show where it's all these cut shots and samples of all this action going on, and so-and-so hits and so-and-so punches, and it's like the next time on our program, you'll see these things happen. It's that kind of a headspace. But of course you have to have your narrator appear in there at some point. You do and you don't. I mean, it's just as easy for you not to have them. You can have some some sort of text here, like tonight on channel 4, whatever. And in the last panel, just have an audience right here are the ones that are all getting splashed with mud instead. Optimally, you want to have that audience situated somehow in the first panel, or the first section of the page, so that when they get splashed with mud at the end, you're like, who are those people and where'd they come from? Because you can't expect all of your readers to make that logic leap of, well, that's the audience spectators that are right there at the side of the fight. You can't assume that everybody's going to get that. So you have to present them in some previous context. So you could do text here instead and little shots of audience members standing around them, and they get coated in mud. That's another possibility of doing the same page. But the television program narrative, and I wrote commentary if you're going to have the person. But if you're just doing a narrative of tonight at 6, see such and such from this country and such from that country fighting it out. It'll be a splash ride of fun. I don't know. And the fourth one is a narrative. But the beauty of narrative voice is that you can do it in all kinds of different ways. I mean, you can try to write this with the sensibilities of the Old West, hence the motif that we've the visual motif we've sort of borrowed here. So you can write it with that. Here's the two fellers meeting up there in Old Canyon Gulch, or you can do it as sort of and all Westerns really are is retellings of samurai stories, right? So you could do it some sort of a way where such and such of the, the American clan and such of the Russian clan, and, here they are facing off one another and getting soaked in the rain, and it feels more like that kind of shogun aesthetic where you have this person has been training for this long and this person has been training for this, and their country is trying to assert the power over the existing status quo. There's a million different ways you can go about doing this, and having the whole declarative "let's wrestle" across the page allows you to really change the tone. So you can present it in this whole very intense way, like here's these two guys and they're about to fight, and then it goes off. Susanna says, it's cold here, my fingers are almost frozen. Oh, Susanna, go like this, or rub your hands together, or put them in your pockets. Oh my goodness, don't freeze your fingers on. I love this. We could delve into storytelling in our journal pages too. Well, that's the beautiful thing about something like this, is that, get my goofy face on here again. So when we're doing things like this, when we're just exploring little bits of story on a piece of paper, when you're scribbling it all down really loosely, and saying, oh, I got this idea for a story. I'm going to try to flesh out a few pages of it. You can see this at the start of the video. Okay, I kind of scratched that itch, and then you just take those pages and stick them someplace aside. It doesn't mean you have to do anything with these. What this is doing, and if you put it in a journal, it's just the same. I mean, it's the reason that I keep sketchbooks the way that I do is because of the fact that some of these ideas that come to mind, this little ideation period where you sit down and you try to figure out, in character anatomy or character design or perspective scribbles or just want to draw a cool rocket, whatever it is that you've got going together in that sketchbook, that works out great. You can have a separate sketchbook like I do where you're just doing page compositions. But sometimes confining yourself to a sketchbook or a journal, maybe you want to let yourself feel a little more free-flowing and work a little bit larger. So having a larger piece of paper, well, I don't want to just waste it on one picture, then do something like this, But this also helps you to try to interpret the same idea in 4 different ways, can also have the benefit of assessing the parts of each of these things that might work, the best in your mindset. Like you might see something in here, like let's say this guy presenting the 2 different fighters, okay, in that first page layout. well, we've expanded on that a little bit here by having this person getting hit by mud as well, or the background characters being more prominent, like it is in the second page, or having it just be entirely action oriented, or this is far more dramatic oriented. And the beautiful thing about a page like this is you don't have to draw the bottom panel of this either. Sometimes these opportunities present themselves, that doing this story in this kind of a austere way of such and such who represents the people of the Western Hemisphere, and such who represents the Eastern Hemisphere, which has as much claim to the its global position as the other. Well, they're going to settle it out here in the mud. Let's wrestle. So you can lead through this sophisticated thing and end on this really silly note. You don't even have to show the wrestling part, the mud wrestling part. The assumption is there. It's raining. They're standing in mud. You can even sink their feet in it. And by shouting "Let's wrestle," it lets the audience fill in the rest of the story. So you're not, while these approaches are far more physical oriented, far more visually physical oriented, where you're showing the actual combatants at it, this one isn't. If we remove that bottom panel, it lets the reader make the level of the fight be as epic as they like. I mean, it could be hardcore, terrible, vicious fighting, or it could be the two of them, come up to each other, and one person picks up a gob of mud in their hand and flicks it at the other person, and the other goes, "Hey!" And then they pick up some mud and they throw it back at the other one and goes, "Oh yeah," and they pick up a mud ball. It could just be this elaborate, prolonged story of just this nonsense of these two professional people that are having a silly fight. So there's benefit to consideration of that just being the page and not having this bottom portion on it. But this is the kind of thing that once you've done these and you can look at them together, you might find something in there that you can, in this case, omit, or something that I think that would work better on this page is if I had a commentator guy who's sort of standing under the hood there going, "And here the two of them are," like it's all about sitting down with the things that you've already put on paper and presupposing directions that they could go in. It's way more interesting than using color or common elements to unify the pages. I tell stories while compiling the pages, but haven't translated a story onto pages. Yeah, it doesn't have to be wordy. No, not at all. Not at all. Sometimes, as little said as possible has far more effect. There's a thing that when you watch, there's a lot of Chinese and Korean and Japanese sword fighting movies, and that have these wonderful presentations where the film will start. There's one I saw recently. The film starts and it has this blizzard, and it has these soldiers marching with their spears, in their armor, also with swords, but they're marching with their spears, and in two rows, and in the midst of these two rows is this little carriage being pulled by a couple of horses. And then, of course, a bunch of white guys hop up out of the snow, and it turns into a big sword fight because they want to get to the dude in the carriage. But before the white guys and the soldier guys that are in black with the spears start getting into a fight, there's this wonderful, here they are marching out of the snow. Here they are, you're seeing some of their faces as the camera pans through the crowd as they go by. And then, somebody puts his hand up and says, "Hold!" And he senses something, And so you've got all of this dramatic thing. You have all these different visual key moments until one guy goes, "Hold." And then he doesn't even explain to everybody why. Because before he gets the opportunity to do so, up come the white, samurai guys out of the snow. So there's a ton of things that can be done that add atmosphere and add gravitas to the moment, where you don't have to actually even have any words. And there's probably benefit to that in certain story ideas, and other story ideas. It may well be too confusing, but it's all about the choices that you make. And of these 4 layouts that I did, I only put the dialogue on, like dialogue notes on the one. I mean, I've got the word tonight versus, and over here I got let's wrestle. But aside from that, this is the top right corner is the only one that has any conversational stuff going on at all, because in all honesty, by having the background characters as the ones whose dialogue is as important, if not more important, than the fact that these 2 goofballs are wrestling on behalf of their countries. This is a very textual piece, where this really doesn't have to be. It's all about how you go about and play with it. It's all about how you go out and make those choices for which one you're going to do. But, I just thought I'd show you guys this kind of a fun little exercise and encourage people to give it a go. All that we've used for this is a couple of little markers. They've got, in the case of these ones, they've got a brush tip at one end, which is very thick and loose, right? And then they've got a really fine point at the other end, which is, of course, hard and rigid and thin-lined, so that you can do things like the dialogue, like so. But, this is the opposite end, right? In this big, thick, chunky, commentary or whatever text here that defines each of the page versions. So there we go. Politicians fighting on mud instead of sending people to war. This is a suggestion from Chris K. Yeah, and we tried 4 different versions of it, so that's kind of fun. If anybody sees one of these 4 that they want to put in the comments for this video, and say, don't put it in the chat because I'm about to sign off. But if you want to put it in the comments for this video and say, I like number 1, I like number 2, I like number 3, I like number 4, feel free to do so. I'm not sure if I'll specifically finish one for tomorrow or for posting, or I'll just post the 4 of them as an exercise. I think there's benefit for me doing that on some of these social media posts as much as it is doing a finished page, because I think some people are looking to figure out this part of things, because we can't just assume that everybody's going to that finished thing off the hop every time. Maybe I'm being unfair. So, and our quote for today is, crazy ideas are cool, right? Also from Chris. So there we go, folks. There's 4 different ways of interpreting the same suggestion, which is along the bottom of this page. And yeah, so find a random sentence, a random idea, look up any of the previous pages I've already done, and try to think about 4 separate ways you can approach doing something with that idea and see what that does for you. And I'd love to see it. That's about it for me for now. I'll sign off for now. But yeah, if you want to pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the comments for that video, that would be really cool. And I think that, I don't know, comments are good. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming by. Bye for now. I will see you. I will be back for sure on Wednesday. Tomorrow I am teaching. So bye for now, everybody.